Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through a pile of sources, find the really key stuff, and basically give you a shortcut to getting properly up to speed.
Yeah, and today we're doing something a bit different. We're sort of heading out, imaginatively at least, to a windswept hillside. Before dawn.
We're exploring the, peculiar world of a bird called the black grouse. And this phenomenon that's, frankly, baffled people for ages, the lake.
And the sources we've got are fascinating. Everything from these really vivid accounts, people freezing in hides for hours just watching,
Right.
to really detailed scientific papers, genetics, measurements, the works. And then there's the historical angle, too, how people used to think about it all.
So our mission today is to really unpack the black grouse lake. What makes it so unique? What's the big scientific puzzle here?
And could watching this incredibly wild, kind of elaborate display, could it actually tell us something deeper? About, knowledge or beauty or even ourselves. That's one idea floating around in the sources.
Okay, let's jump in. Paint the scene for us. Where does this all start?
Right. So imagine it's April. It's dark, maybe 4:30 in the morning. You're out on these big open hills, the Pennines maybe.
Cold.
Oh, yeah. Crisp frost, sharp air. Darkness is just, starting to fade a tiny bit in the east. And it's quiet, really quiet. Just your own breathing, perhaps.
Okay.
Until you hear this sound overhead. One source calls it an urgent, unearthly humming, like a tiny spaceship engine or something.
Weird. What is that?
It's actually a snipe, a drumming snipe. Makes the sound with its tail feathers when it dives. Amazing, really.
Okay. Not aliens, then.
Not aliens. And then as the light gets a bit better, you'll hear more familiar things. Skylarks singing way up high, maybe that sad call of a curlew.
But the main event, sound-wise, comes from the grouse themselves, right?
Right.
There are these signature calls.
Definitely. First, there's this really sharp noise, described as piercing the night's dull ear. Hard to describe exactly. Like a sneeze, hiss, squawk, screech, all mixed up. Chewy! That's the sound. And one brilliant comparison in the sources is it's like opening a can of lager, but, much louder.
A lager can. I can totally hear that now. Wow. And they make that noise when they're doing what?
When they stretch right up, wings open a bit, it's a real declaration.
But then there's another sound. Almost the opposite.
Yeah.
Much softer.
Yeah, completely different. This continuous sort of otherworldly sound. Hoo-doo-doo-doo-doo-hoo.
Hoo-doo-doo-woo. Okay.
It's described as humming, crooning, bubbling, cooing, like a spacecraft idling or maybe an incantation. It's strange and quite beautiful, actually. That's their main mating call, the roo-cooing.
And that one happens when they're bowing low, chests puffed right out.
Exactly. Necks all swollen with air. So you've got the sharp chewy and the resonant hoo-doo-doo-woo.
But there's a third sound, too. One that signals trouble brewing.
Right. A harsher sound. More irritable, like nair-na-na-air or chakarada. That's when males are, squaring up to each other, getting ready for a bit of a set, too.
And what do the birds look like in this dim light?
They're chunky birds, about the size of a big chicken. Mostly just black shapes, but with these really obvious white patches on their rear ends. They're bums, basically. They stand out.
Okay, so this whole scene, the sounds, the birds,
Yeah.
it happens at a lek. What exactly is a lek?
Well, the word lek is Swedish, means play, and there's an Old English word lekon, which is similar to frolic. So you sometimes see old texts talk about laking places.
Play, frolic. Sounds quite fun.
It does, doesn't it? But the sources are really clear. Whatever the name suggests, this is deadly serious. It's basically a sex market.
Right. Not playing games.
Not at all. The core thing is the males, the cocks, they gather at this exact spot, the leak site. It's very specific. And they do it pretty much every morning before it gets light.
Every morning. For how long?
For months, for maybe October right through to June. But the real peak, the most frantic time, is March to June.
And they're precise about where they stand, too, aren't they?
Incredibly precise. Each male occupies the exact same patch of ground. His little square on the chessboard, as one source puts it, day after day, all season, maybe only 5 or 10 paces across.
And they defend that patch.
Oh, furiously. Constant displaying, trying to impress any females that might show up, defending it against rivals.
Does it get rough?
Sometimes, yeah. There are fights. They can be quite vicious, apparently, sometimes causing injuries.
And part of the display involves those things above their eyes.
Ah, yes. The eye combs. Bright red, swollen, fleshy things. They get described as looking like strawberries or even vermilion sea anemones.
Sea anemones. On a bird's head.
It's quite a look. And they're not smooth either. They're covered in hundreds of tiny little tentacles, like over 300 per comb, so 600 plus in total.
No.
And they inflate with blood when the male is really displaying hard. It's dramatic.
So, stepping back, what makes this whole lekking thing so unusual in the animal world?
Well, several things stand out in the sources. First, just the location. The same fixed spot used daily, yearly, possibly for centuries, even millennia. Most animals move around more.
And the grouping.
Right. The males gather in this really tight, tense flock. In breeding season, most birds pair off and spread out. These guys bunch up.
The displays themselves are different too.
Yeah, the sheer duration. Hours long, almost nonstop for weeks or months. Most animal displays are much briefer, more occasional.
And the mating itself is unusual.
And how predictable and visible it is, yeah. It happens within a pretty narrow time window, those couple of weeks in spring, mostly within about 20 minutes of sunrise.
Yeah.
And you can actually see it happen, which is rare for many birds.
Which is probably why we know so much more about it now, that visibility.
Exactly. And thinking about the history, that fixed spot, one source really muses on this, suggesting these exact patches of ground might have seen this same display for hundreds of thousands of years.
That's mind-blowing. Imagine who might have watched this. Stone Age hunters.
Druids, maybe? Medieval shepherds? The sources even wonder if notorious local figures like that Andrew Stoney Bowes MP might have ridden past and seen it unfolding.
Gives you that feeling, doesn't it? Like you're a bit of a voyeur watching this ancient primal ritual.
Absolutely. Driven by this raw biological urge, and that brings us right to the core mystery we're digging into. Why? Why leak at all? Why here? Why this bird? And why these incredibly fancy, over-the-top displays?
The obvious first thought is sexual selection, right? Males show off, females pick the best. Simple.
Well, yes and no. It's definitely the framework. But the sources really emphasize that the standard theory struggles with the specifics, the aesthetics of it.
Like why black and white? Why the red eyebrows? Why that lyre-shaped tail?
Exactly. Those particular details, these eccentricities, as one writer calls them, general evolutionary theory finds them hard to pin down. And that's where science gets really interesting, isn't it? When things don't quite fit the standard model.
And it gets weirder because we often find these displays beautiful, too. It's not just functional.
Right. Beauty seems to matter to the birds themselves, think peacocks. But why? What role does aesthetics play in evolution? It's a big question.
It's different from physics or chemistry, where general laws explain specific things pretty well. Here, evolution struggles with these quirks.
It does, which leads us to probably the most fascinating puzzle discussed in the sources. The light paradox.
Okay, lay it out for us. It starts with the basics of mating.
Yeah, the deal, essentially. Sperm for eggs. And as the sources point out, for many creatures, sex isn't simple. It involves, quote, reverence, suspicion, angst, and quite a bit of violence.
And the male grouse put in a huge amount of effort.
Immense months of displaying, growing these elaborate feathers, gathering together which attracts predators, fighting, puffing up those eye combs, all for potentially just seconds of actual mating. Why go to all that trouble?
So the paradox.
Okay, it was coined by Gerald Borgia back in '79. The observation is, females are incredibly picky. Obsessively choosy is the phrase used. Often only one male on the whole leak gets most, maybe even all, the matings on a given day.
Okay, picky females. What's the paradox?
Here's the twist. These males tend to live near where they hatched. So a lot of the rivals on the leak are likely related. Brothers, half-brothers, probably sired by last year's successful male.
Ah, so they're all genetically quite similar.
Pretty much. And if females keep choosing from this pool of similar males, generation after generation, you'd expect the genetic diversity on that leak to decrease, right? There should be less and less genetic variation to choose from.
Which means,
Yeah.
why be so incredibly choosy? If they're all basically the same stock, what are you choosing between?
Exactly. That's the paradox.
Exactly.
One source uses this great analogy. Imagine Miss Bennet from Pride and Prejudice trying to choose a husband, but all the eligible men are Darcy's cousins. They look alike, act alike. Yet every woman insists on choosing only one specific cousin, say Tom Darcy. Why be so fussy when the options are so similar?
That makes it really clear. So how does that get resolved? Or does it?
Well, the sources mention that female grouse tend to move away from where they were born. So females arriving at a leak often bring in fresh genes from elsewhere, which stops the whole population becoming dangerously inbred.
Okay, so that helps the bigger picture.
Right. But it doesn't fully explain the extreme choosiness happening right there on the leak among those seemingly similar males. especially as visually, it's apparently quite hard for us humans to tell the males apart unless they've got an injury or something. What are the females seeing?
Which is where the detailed science comes in, trying to figure it out.
Exactly. And the sources really highlight the massive amount of work done, particularly by researchers like Rauno Alatalo and his teams in Scandinavia, starting back in the 70s and 80s.
What kind of stuff were they doing? Sounds intensive.
Oh, it was proper boots on the ground, or maybe bum on frozen ground science. They'd catch birds using traps with oats, apparently.
Simple but effective.
Then weigh them, measure everything, wings, tails, those eye combs, figure out their age from their feathers, take blood samples, look at genetics, hormones, parasites. Huge numbers involved. Over 1,200 females, 1,700 males tagged just in their main study area.
Wow. And getting really detailed, like measuring feather colors.
Yeah, using things called spectroradiometers to get precise readings of blueness, violet blue reflectance. And for the eye combs, measuring size and redness with spectrophotometers. They even counted the tiny tentacles.
Did they find anything linking those features to success? Like, do females prefer the reddest combs?
Interestingly, the big Finnish study found it was more about the size of the combs, not so much the color intensity, that correlated with male weight and how successful he was at mating.
Size matters then.
It seems so, for eye combs anyway. It supports this idea of honest signals. Maybe bigger combs mean the male is in better condition, healthier, because it costs resources like carotenoid pigments from food to grow and maintain them. So females might be picking up on that.
So that's one clue for the paradox. Picking based on condition signals.
Potentially, yeah. But a huge part of the science was also just watching.
Yeah.
Patiently. For hours.
Those stakeouts.
Exactly. Hides set up, grids marked out on the leak, recording minute by minute from like 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. every day during the peak season.
Dedication.
Totally. Using color rings on the birds' legs to know who was who, tracking where they were, how long they stayed, who fought whom, who displayed, and crucially, who mated.
What key patterns emerged from all that observation?
Well, they firmed up the daily schedule. Males arrive about an hour before sunrise. Females turn up around sunrise. Mating happens really fast, mostly in the first 20 minutes after sunup.
And the territories.
Confirmed. Males stick to their exact patch day after day, and there's a tendency for them to move towards the center of the leak as they get older, hitting their prime around 3 or 4 years old.
So there's a kind of hierarchy, or at least structure.
Yeah, you could say that. The central guys are often described as first class. The younger ones on the edges, the peripherals, are maybe second class. They display less, watch more, sometimes try their luck sneaking in. And then you get visiting non-territorial males, third class.
And that thing about courage within their boundaries.
Isn't that fascinating? If there's an alarm like a predator, they scatter. But when they come back, they don't just land anywhere. They run back to their own specific territory. Their bravery, such as it is tied to their patch.
It really emphasizes how formal and structured the whole leak setup is, despite the chaos.
Yeah, this almost arbitrary formality. Everyone knows their place, respects those invisible lines.
It's amazing to contrast that detailed understanding with how people saw it in the past.
Oh, absolutely. The sources pull out some great examples from the 19th century. Naturalists like Buick, Seebohm, Malaise. They tended to view the leak like a medieval tournament.
Jousting knights.
Pretty much. They called the leak site the lists, or the tournament ground. Males were knights battling it out, and the winner got the damsel's hand. The female, who was seen as totally passive, just waiting to bestow her affections.
Which is just wrong, based on what we know now.
Completely wrong. Modern observation makes it crystal clear. The females choose. They actively select their mate and invite mating.
And the fights aren't usually decisive winner-takes-all events?
Rarely. The sources stress that most fights end with both males still on their territories, maybe just looking a bit disheveled. It's more about maintaining boundaries than outright conquest, a sort of détente.
It's performative, almost.
In a way, yes. And it's funny, one source points out even a recent documentary from 2023 still pushed that old bosses male versus challenger storyline, which misrepresents the more complex reality science has uncovered. These old ideas stick around.
So that description from the 60s about the central males being kind of egalitarian seems more accurate.
Much more so. A Finnish scientist back then said they seemed equal to each other, showing outstanding respect for their common territorial boundaries. Dutch researchers agreed, saying all territorial males were of equal rank. A far cry from knights and damsels.
Though some earlier observers were getting closer.
Yeah, Llewellyn Lloyd in 1867. He had some odd interpretations, like thinking a female cry was Dolores's anxiety. But crucially, he did notice that females solicited the males, which many others missed.
And the real breakthrough in pure observation came with Edmund Selous.
He gets a lot of credit in the sources, yes. Writing around 1909, apparently he was the first to give a really accurate, detailed account based purely on watching, without all the romantic baggage.
What was his story?
A fascinating character. Shy barrister turned obsessive bird watcher. Quite critical of his peers who just shot things. He called them thanatologists, death studiers. He had incredible patience, a really sharp eye. He was noticing details back then that are still studied today, like female jealousy or interference in mating.
Just shows the power of careful observation.
Absolutely, and others built on it. David Lack, first noting the fixed territories in the 30s. Otto Hahn, watching during the war, even learning to imitate the calls. Ilka Koivisto classifying the male types in the 60s and suggesting the anti-predator idea, more eye-spotting danger.
And Crichton Hogan nailing down the timings.
Right, their systematic grid studies in the 60s really firmed things up, although, funnily enough, Kenneth Richmond in the 50s watched them, but concluded it was all social, not sexual. Maybe he just missed the crucial 20 minutes around sunrise. Shows how easy it is to miss the key part.
Thinking about the risks, gathering like this, making all that noise, it must make them really obvious.
Hugely conspicuous. Those cheery calls carry for maybe a mile, those white rear ends flashing in the dim light.
Could that conspicuousness actually be part of why Lex evolved?
That's a theory mentioned, yes. David Queller's idea from 1987. Basically, bigger leks are louder, more visible. They might attract disproportionately more females than smaller ones. So even if it's bad for most individual males in the group because only one or two get mates, a female preference for simply joining a larger, more stimulating group could drive the evolution of lekking.
Interesting. But it definitely increases danger.
No doubt. Leks are like a beacon for predators, goshawks, buzzards. And in some places, human hunting is, or was, a big factor. Both sexes are taking a gamble gathering there.
Yet the males seem compelled to return even after a scare.
Right. That cowardice when fleeing, but then desperate to get back to their specific square. The pull of that territory is incredibly strong.
So let's bring it back to you, the observer, sitting in that hide now, trying to see it fresh, like Selous.
And the paradox is right there. These males displaying like crazy for weeks, months, often when there are no females anywhere nearby. Their faith seems undimmed, as one source puts it.
While the females might only pop in for a few days all season.
Exactly. It makes the whole thing feel like this play with endless rehearsals and only a handful of full performances.
Which makes you wonder again, is it just about attracting females? Or is something else going on?
You have to wonder, are they signaling to rivals, look how fit I am, don't mess with me? Is it just hormones driving them, an urge they can't resist? Could they in some way actually enjoy the performance, the sound, the ritual itself?
Yeah, that difficulty in telling the males apart visually.
It just adds to the puzzle of female choice, doesn't it? If they look so similar to us, what subtle cues are the females picking up on? It makes their intense focus on visual displays even more mysterious.
So the observer watching today, their reason for being there is almost part of the story too.
I think so. There's the pure love of being out there, that connection with the wildness of it, maybe even a spiritual element. But there's also that intellectual curiosity, right? That hope that maybe, just maybe, through watching closely enough, you could get a little closer to solving the leak paradox, understanding this whole mystery of sexual display and beauty in nature.
It's a search for meaning in the dance.
Yeah, a deep dive into a patch of moorland.
So, wrapping this up, what have we learned from this deep dive into the black grouse lek? We've seen this apparently simple mating gathering is actually incredibly complex.
Yeah, full of layers of behavior, historical misinterpretations, and scientific puzzles that are still being worked on.
We've heard those strange calls, pictured the displays, the almost ritualized fights, considered the ancient stage, and looked at how science tries to measure and understand it all.
And it keeps coming back to that lek paradox. Why be so incredibly fussy when choosing a mate, especially when the options seem so similar, at least genetically?
It feels like this glimpse into one small corner of the natural world, focusing on why beauty might matter to birds, why their displays are so complex. It actually raises much bigger questions.
It really does. It's a fantastic reminder that even in things we think we understand or have studied for ages, there are still profound mysteries hiding in plain sight. Challenges our theories, makes us look again.
Makes us question and just wonder. So maybe the ultimate question isn't just why the grouse are doing this elaborate dance. Maybe it's also about what this wild performance tells you, the listener, about where knowledge comes from, the unexpected places you find it, and maybe the limits of what we can ever fully